What happened? What happened, man? Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. After several weeks swinging up and down with a lot of extremes, we have a slightly more relaxed and very varied set. And yet, we still have some duties that don't seem entirely free. That being said, for duty 1, we have Fractal Continuum hard as Reaper, a very rare sight indeed. There's something interesting about packs in the dungeon featuring chimeras with most of the toolkit of the boss from Cutter's Cry, and minotaurs with the classic toolkit for their style. But the final boss is particularly interesting. It has a look at the boss tell for both a circle and a donut AoE. It has a place proximity AoE that leaves a persistent puddle. It also has a flare marker, and last but not least, it actually has an HP threshold initiated Hard Enrage. The Hard Enrage is very easily missed, largely because it is initiated once it has finished whatever it was doing beforehand, and the DPS check it introduces is relaxed enough that a tank holding their resources to burst can make the DPS check entirely alone. So pretty much any party doing this duty synced would be able to overcome it without issue. It is still interesting that the boss has one though. For duty 2, we went to fight Bugman as Pixmancer, featuring Bugman, the Bugman tank Arcadion, the master of Bugmanning. For duty 3, we went to Sylph Management, and thanks to being super low level, we don't have many options. What is mildly amusing about Pictomancer at this level is that the AoE Fire and Red still gives you the ether hues to access Aero and Green when you don't have access to the AoE Aero and Green, meaning you could be in certain target counts where maybe AoE Fire and Red is better, but single target Aero and Green and Water and Blue are worth using, so you mix up the sequence as a result. For duty 4, we went to Tender Valley. On the second boss, I was a bit distracted discussing something unrelated to the fight, which led to me being hit by a mechanic repeatedly. Despite that, I survived, but that could have led to my healer being very distracted, which then led to their death. Thankfully, I brought Phoenix Downs. That out of the way, let's talk a bit about Pixomancer. A funny thing about optimization with Pixomancer is that classic Holy and White is a damage loss, technically, that we can math out. Essentially, on single target, Holy and White is like being able to fire an extra instant version of Water and Blue, just without all the resource generation and so on. But because of what all that resource generation leads to, the average potency of the entirety of 2 full 1-3 combos and a subtractive 1-3 combo and a comet is very slightly stronger than a Holy and White as is. Effectively, if you don't need Holy and White for anything, and you can keep 100% uptime throughout the whole fight, planning your movement where you have instant casts already, then Holy and White doesn't provide anything that a full 1-2-3, 1-2-3, 4, 5, 6, 7 combo couldn't do better. However, the moment you're not sure if you can do the full entirety of that combo, Holy and White stonks rise, and the moment you move while your GCD is ready, Holy and White stonks skyrocket. Like, if you stop casting for like a fifth of a second, it would have been better to just use Holy and White. So the advice here is to not be so afraid of using this mobility option and focus on taking it out of the plan once you get routined enough in a fight that you don't need it, or if the damage requirement somehow is so high that you can't rely on it. And then reintroduce it at the end of fights where Holy and White can still be useful where you can't finish a full combo anyway. And also, let's not forget that Holy and White scales nicely with AoE. For duty 5, we went to Praetorium as Black Mage, level 50, where some of the most cursed Black Mage optimization resides. From double Blizzard 3 with Swift Cast, to straight up Swift Casting Fire 3 somehow being good in certain situations. That being said, sticking to the tradition, how would you envision Black Mage as a Pokemon? I've talked about this before, and there are many ways to do it. One could be Ice and Fire to focus on the states of the job. Another would be to make it Fire and Electric so that the Ice attacks are deliberately weaker. You could also do any combo of the two types and give it an ability that makes the third also count as a type, quote unquote, with respect to the same type attack bonus, by boosting that element by 50%. Yet another angle could be to make it a fire and dark or psychic type, interpreting spells like Xenoglossy as either psychic or dark, so you have the bonus for the 2 types Black Mage is known to do the most damage with, while still leaving the door open for to learn Thunderbolt and Ice Beam for coverage. For a bit of a different angle, I think a Pokemon that quite effectively demonstrates what Black Mage would be doing, strangely, is Porygon Z. Since Tri-Attack features all 3 elements, it has access to a wide range of coverage, and you could teach it Nasty Plot for a bigger damage boost, or Agility to compensate for its speed. But Porygon Z is a glass cannon with a middling speed stat that can work to do what you need it to do, and covers many elements. I also just really like Porygon Z. What do you think? For DD6, we went to Castrum Meridianum as Samurai. So continuing with the MSQ roulette means more of the Pokemon Jobs theme, looking at Samurai. I'm sure many would suggest fighting and steel due to the combination of a martial art plus metal weapon. From what I can put together from what the job uses, I could both see that, but also take a very different perspective. Yukikaze and Kasha have icy and flowery themes to them, that also feature in other actions, so Samurai could possibly feature grass or ice types as well. Some of the most prominent features of the job lends itself to a lot of interpretations. For example, it could be a fragile, high-speed attacker due to the pace of many of its attacks. It could be a setup style attacker with moves like sword stance, demonstrating how Samurai prepares for its big moves. Tengensu could also inspire a slower, tankier Samurai that relies on moves that benefit from going second, like Revenge or Avalanche. Although, admittedly, moves like that are rarely very useful competitively, to my knowledge. But I do think it is interesting how much you can do with a job when thinking of a completely different style of game. Getting back to 14 then, a really awkward position for Samurai at level 50 is how to make the most of Make-Your Shisui and maximizing uptime of Higanbana. There's a whole thing to be said about wanting to use Make-Yo as quickly as possible so you can get to use it as much as possible. But at the same time, the short fight lengths at this level means that whether you rush the Make-Yo out the door ASAP or not, you will probably get roughly the same number of uses. And knowing when you should rush it out to get another use requires too much knowledge of the party for it to ever matter in a duty like this, so I tend to prioritize getting the most 3-step combo finishers in it when I have the option. For duty 7, we're standing in Poison Clouds as Summoner. Or, well, we could, but the tank is actually respecting the clouds. Nice. For duty 8, we are an 8-minute replacement in Puppet's bunker as Scholar. We arrived to be locked out of the 3-plane boss's room, so after finding our seats, to pass the time, we have a live commentary of the battle. An awkward detail as we go in is that we are so far away that we can only see and target the bosses when they are at specific locations. And when it goes even further than that, we can't even see 2 of the bosses when they line up for the triple half-room cleaves in the north corner. That said, let's check in on the live commentary of the battle. Well, everybody, you see there was a tank buster right there. Now, do they know how to deal with the stack, the line stack? As you all may know, you probably do know, the line stack actually reaches far across from where your team is situated. So if you choose to take your line stack while pointing at a different alliance raid, they're going to be in trouble because the line stack actually applies a magic vuln, which is a debuff that will basically make another line stack lethal. There it was. Looks like with pretty funny directions for team. I believe that's team B up there. But I mean, they didn't point at anyone, so everyone lived. Very nice. Now, is there anything else left in the fight? Now, let's see here. Our team's boy here has a 33%. This one over here has 32. We have a little bit of a race going on here between A and C. Who are you betting on winning? Who do you think will win this? There aren't really that much more like that. Oh yeah, there's this mechanic where you have to actually pay attention to which side the lines are doing. Like, this Reaper's in trouble. He did not choose to dodge in a very smart way. But it looks like Never Punished survived with 1 HP. We also have a Skull over there that lived just barely. Just barely. See, there's a lot of bets on B. That is the Joker pick. That's the only one that we've seen nothing about. We don't know if they're really far away or if they're like ahead. To be fair, Alliance A, specifically Alliance A, is a player down, so they are probably at a massive disadvantage. That probably explains why they have why theirs had more HP than Team C's. They were missing a player, but hey, maybe the 7 players that Team A has are just that good. They could pop off. They could win. We could do this. They could do this. I'm not even there. I don't even count. I'm just here laughing. Now we can only see Team A, who's reaching the goal line. Will C come first? Oh, it's coming down to a photo finish. And A wins the race, and C literally a second after. What a battle! What a match! For the rest of the duty, things went about as you'd probably expect, although, amazingly, I managed to dodge the teleporting lasers near the end of the final boss fight, not that it would have caused problems if I'd been hit anyway. For duty 9, we went to Odin as summoner. The fight goes really well, with the first death happening during the first Gungnir set, where the paladin ends up taking a tank buster with no mitigation due to an awkwardly timed Sheltron, and then dying from an auto attack immediately after. Shortly after, the other tank dies from being boxed in from lines and circles. And then, just before the DPS check at the end, one of our healers go down. But aside from that, things go quite alright. A really random damage optimization tip for summoner at this level is that the only way to sneak 6 ruins inside Ether Charge is to swift cast the 6th one, assuming you have at least a little bit of spell speed. For duty 10, we went to A1N, Alexander's Oppressor, as Ninja. For a boss like this, where you may need to switch target near the end, Ninja's damage buffs being actually debuffs on the target can make this really awkward. Thankfully, in this run, my 2-minute burst came and went just before the second boss came in, and the party as a whole was so good about target switching that the second boss somehow died first at the end. Sometimes, it just is that easy. For duty 11, we went to M9N, Arcadion's Vamp Fatale, as a 16-minute replacement machinist. Supposedly, a large part of the party were replacements, as the group fell apart after wiping twice to the flail at phase. I can only assume a major reason for that is either players not soaking the towers themselves, or ignoring the flails leading to them exploding, because the damage from either of those options could be big enough to cause trouble for an unprepared team. Considering how crazy this attempt goes, it isn't that surprising that there were wipes before. On the first bat mechanic, the Scholar goes down. Then, for the first Aether letting, the Scholar goes down again. Then, during the flail at phase, both tanks end up with the chainsaw dot alongside the white mage. Meanwhile, the Scholar dies from a combo of receiving this debuff on top of being hit with raid wide damage. Ultimately, over half the raid ends up with the chainsaw dot. We somehow exit the flail phase alive, but by alive, I of course mean me, 1 tank and 1 healer. What? In fact, just to underline how badly this is going, keep track of that Pictomancer and consider how long they stay dead as we continue on. We barely survive the raid wipe that concludes the whole phase, and we're back to 2 healers. And if you ever needed evidence that the double tank buster chooses targets at random if there aren't enough tanks on normal, the fact it saw our Scholar get back on their feet and immediately decided, death for you, should give you all the information you need. In this specific situation, the only target that would be better for it to target would have been me, since the Scholar could help with party recovery while I already used all of my defensive cooldown, so all I can do for the next while is damage. But between the healers, the white mage has been way more capable of staying alive, so keeping them makes more sense. At least the Scholar managed to rest someone before going down. From my perspective, the moment we had LB3, I would have suggested a healer use it just so we could easily stabilize. That being said, by the time we had LB3, I could totally understand holding it for an even worse situation. By the time our party has been mostly fully recovered, the Pictomancer had been dead on the floor for a solid 4 minutes. And if you ever needed a demonstration of someone who was paying close attention despite that, note that the Pictomancer was ready to catch that rest almost instantly. And after all that, we managed to hold it together long enough that everyone got across the finish line with their weakness debuffs fully expired. What a journey! For duty 12, we went to A9N, Alexander's Refurbisher 0 as Monk. The good news is that the enemies that need repositioning initially don't do so much damage that a DPS can't do it, so I take the responsibility of dealing with those packs. The real problems come with the Faust. It is a bit funny that the tank pulled the Faust to the 4th platform and then slowly moved it to the 3rd, either for no particular reason or because they determined we could beat it in time. It does make sense, but it is a risk, since if the Faust goes in the soup alive, we die. But it laying on the floor for an extended period due to sitting on platform 4 means that the boss is nigh invincible for longer. We still did great on this one. For duty 13, we went to Zelenia as Bard. I think this might actually have been the cleanest Zelenia run I've seen. This fight has 3 core things that tend to make it problematic, especially for first timers. The first, perhaps most weirdly prominent one, is that frequently throughout the fight, Zelenia makes a small circle under her, a danger zone that puts a very strong dot on you for as much as touching it. A lot of the mechanics in the fight heavily incentivize you to dash to a safe spot, possibly through the middle, which then leads you to die from the dot instead of the damage from the mechanic you avoided. The second thing is simply the sort of difficult to read slices on the arena. They have become a lot easier to read since the changes, but it is still a bit much with all the overlaps. And then the third thing is that Zelenia has many overlapping mechanics, where she hurts you towards standing in the danger zone of one mechanic to dodge another. And while this kind of stuff can be very commonplace in harder content, it is less common, to say the least, in normal content. So a lot of first-timers get caught off guard by something like this, and that's when she gets you. When it comes to Bard, I'm pretty sure I only dropped my dots once or twice throughout, which is pretty good for my track record. For duty 14, we went to Aurum Vale as Dark Knight. Overall, the run went just fine. We didn't have any deaths, so that's already a plus, but every time I tried to get fancy with avoiding pulling certain packs, it seemed like someone made no attempt to be sneaky or accidentally hit the pack anyways. After the duty, I gave some tips and pointers to the healer, so hopefully they can do even better. After all, things went fine, as I said before. Some particular examples of packs that could have been avoided is that with the changes to Aurum Vale, the mushroom pack on the left is skippable if you move carefully. In the room before the second boss, the first pack on the left is skippable. And yes, I know you can sneak through the whole first room to skip everything, but good luck getting people to do that. And finally, for duty 15, we went to M8N, Arcadion's Howling Blade, as Viper. Considering how this duty has gone in Mentor Roulette for me so far, I sure am glad to see 2 red mages, just in case. Things looked promising up to the first Beck and Moonlight, where one of our healers went down. After that, things develop safely until the ad phase where the spread AoEs get a bit spicy, but no one dies. And then we make it to the pillar mechanic, where nearly everyone gets hit at least once, but only the same healer that had trouble earlier went down again. But just based on my track record with this fight, this low amount of death is actually impressive. A very wide variety of duties, and yet still focused on something, normal rates in this case, for a set. This time, we also had Qs pop a lot more reliably for DPS, so we hardly had any duties as a support at all. This time, we also passed 22 27ths on the achievement. The funny thing about that is that as we approach the finish line, the average fraction will get crazier and crazier, noting how recently we passed 4/5, meaning that that is the most reasonable fraction we could have. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, back in the day, mage DPS jobs all had access to their own unique spin on a spell that was, effectively, an AoE bind. Black Mage's Blizzard 2 used to be a centered AoE on themselves that bound enemies briefly, while Freeze was a ground-targeted bind with a pathetic 20 potency attached to it that bound enemies for much longer. Summoners had Tri-Bind, which wasn't much better at 30 potency, and then Red Mage came in to match the consistency with Tether that did 0 damage, but still applied an AoE bind. All of these options were effectively removed with Shadowbringers.